Discover how smarter project insights can lead to better project outcomes.
Hello, project people. Guess what time it is? Yes, that time to speak to your favorite project podcast players. That's myself and my friend from over the pond, Mr. Dale Fung. Dale, we have another Project Connect group happening in London. Tell me about it and how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I don't know if I'm quite a player as you put us, but maybe
you are
with that
You're
cap.
a consultant, right?
You look like a player with that cap and those headphones on. But no, yes, we do have another PCG, #PCG London network night on the 3rd of Feb, folks. If you happen to listen to this podcast before the 3rd of Feb, come along. It's all on LinkedIn. And we actually collaborating this year with the Project Hack, a hackathon, data analytics, hack number 13, I think it is. So that'll be really exciting. And if you want to know more, just get in touch. But enough about that, Val, because I'm hugely, hugely excited about today's pod.
You're always excited, mate. Yeah, and you are a player. Look, let's bring our guest in because we could talk all day, and we do. Mr. Antonio Nieto-Rodriguez, it's so good to have you here. Now, usually when we have people on, they just talk about projects, but you've written about projects. So welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Val. Dal, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm good. It's a bit late. I'm usually a morning person, so I think it's going to be an interesting chat here. Thank you.
Fantastic, Antonio. Well, it is early in Melbourne, but look, I wanted to, as I usually do, I love to find out how people fall into projects, and everyone's career is different. Antonio, where did you start? Where did your journey begin in the project world?
Sure. So I've been reflecting about this several times, but there's two very big inflection points in my career. Very early when I started working, I was hired by a company called Unisys Technology, working in Amsterdam. I was hired as an order analyst. Basically, what that meant is just putting paper through. There were faxes at the time. Imagine, I don't know if people know what a fax is, but the thing that you put on paper goes. And so I was doing
facsimile,
facsimile. I was doing that, and that was my role, order analyst. So checking that the orders and then suddenly 6 months down the line, they said that we're launching this project. We're creating a shared service center. Somebody wants to volunteer to be in the project. And I raised my hand. I said, yes, I want to try that. What the project. And then from day one, I love that. I thought, wow, every day is different in the project. I'm learning. It's not the boring stuff that I'm doing in the operational side. And so that's where I first off, and it allowed me to travel very early in my career. I was traveling, I was teaching the processes and the systems that we develop in the shared service around Europe. So I kind of fell in love with that type of work and the diversity and everyday different. And then later on, I was working for a very large consulting company, top one. I had become like it's a partnership, so I had become close to partner. And to become a partner, you need to have like a business idea. The partners invest in you, they make you partner if you're going to make a few millions euros every year with your business idea. My idea was, let's develop project advisory services, because everybody needs project advisors. See, everybody fails with their projects. The partner said, great pitch, Antonio. We love your passion to project management. However, this is not something for us. It's a low added value project management. Anybody can do that. So you're fired. And I said, what? Yeah, you're fired. Project management is down the line. It's not strategic. It's not fancy. It's not for a consulting firm like us. So that was where I said, come on. And so since then, 15 years has passed, and I've focused mostly on convincing senior leaders that project management is something that they need to have.
Yeah. We are, well, look, you were ahead of your time, Antonio, obviously. And they must be, eating their fists right now because the project management, I guess they're having their day now. We're kind of like celebrity chefs. I mean, project managers is one of the biggest growing professions in the world. And look, we're grateful that that happened. Obviously, that was a great inflection point, and thanks for sharing that. What got you into writing books, though? Because that's a big kind of pivot to just picking. You can just be a project advisor, you can just do project management. What made you write the written word and talk about advisory in books? And how did you get started there?
Well, like the secret story that nobody should know is, but it wasn't more like a personal challenge. I was a terrible student. I was a terrible student in high school. I was just passing and borderline. University was terrible. And I thought, come on, I cannot be that bad. No. So I said, well, let's put myself this challenge. It happened after 10 years working. So I had developed already a passion for researching. I said, okay, I'm going to try to write a book. In Spain, we have a saying that you have a fulfilled life if you've had a child, you plant a tree, and you've written a book. So I was kind of going for that. And it was really tough, but I managed to write the book. And I felt like it was a great way to learn myself. Trying to put structure on what I knew, doing more research, finding nice case studies. And second, I love to share. And so that's kind of the backside. Is more like a personal test that I was not that stupid, right?
I love that plant a tree. What was it? Have children and write a book?
Write a book, yeah.
How's it said in Spanish? Do you know?
Plantar un árbol, tienes que plantar un árbol, tener un niño y escribir un libro.
Excellent. So anyone listening, there you go. I actually really think that's fantastic. That's why we do the podcast too, Antonio. We think this is the verbal books, if you like. We get to obviously appreciate everyone's opinions and perspectives. And I imagine you get the same thing when you write books. You research, and maybe you have a pre-existing condition or a bias that you think you know the answer, and then you do a bit of research and realize that that you weren't right, or your opinions changed by other people that you interview or that you research, and that's fantastic. Now, look, this subject matter today is very interesting to me, and I know you've got some books out on this, so we'll hand over to you. The title of this is a bit mysterious and ambiguous, and I like it. The project economy. Can we go into this? What do we mean by project economy?
Sure. So I've been talking about the project economy maybe 4 or 5 years. What I realized is there's two main data points so that people understand very easy. On a macro level is what happens in countries where public sector investment. The world has never seen the amount of investment for reconstruction, development of economies that what we're going to see in the next 10 years. After the COVID, the pandemic, huge amount of funding, much more, maybe 100 times more than Marshall Plan and what happened in the financial crisis. So that, if there's public spending, that leads to project, infrastructure project, healthcare projects, and so on. So that there's no doubt about that. The point that I like to focus more is what happens within companies. And this is where the biggest disruption I see is that the type of work that people are doing, and I remember when I started in operations doing organized, is shifting from operations to project-based. So what does it mean? In the past 50 years, the focus of every organization, I'm not talking about a consulting-based company, project-based company, real estate company. I'm talking about the more average company that has operations and then also some projects. So these companies, most of the resources, most of the budgets, most of the management attention, senior management attention, KPIs, payments and rewards has been focused on operational activities, how well we're performing. And the focus and project people were there, nice to have, but had never been a priority, right? Over the years, we've become more efficient in operations, right? That's been the focus. Let's do things with less people, faster, more automated. So obviously you're shifting resources from operations to projects. So what happened over the last 20 years is that you see many operation people working in projects as well. So they have the operational job and then projects on top and more and more and more. And so that's been increased. So slowly what's happening is that the operational jobs are shrinking and the middle of the company is moving into project-based work. And this is what I call the project economy, saying with automation, with robots, with artificial intelligence, operations are wiped away, right? You just need to go to a bank and you don't see any bankers. It's just IT people. And so what happens with the resources? They're moving all to work project-based, agile teams, self-managed teams. So this is the biggest disruption because it's a very different business model. Everything changes, the culture, the hierarchy. You know, we work in hierarchies before, very hierarchical, and that was great when operations was prime, but you cannot have a hierarchy when you're dealing with digital transformation projects. That's a mess, right? The rewards the same. So everything is kind of being touched by this shift between operational work being prime to project-based work prime. And the big difference here is that it's not just the project managers who have more work, it's that most of the people in an organization become part of the project world. Maybe just a small, another addition to close this. I don't like to go too long. They asked me, so what's the difference with the gig economy, right? The gig economy, the Ubers, the independent people getting together into a project and then breaking for another company. What I say is the project economy brings the gig economy within the companies, right? That's the big difference, is that suddenly you don't have people in boxes, but everybody's kind of free to choose and go into a project and then move into another project within the company, still employees.
Yeah, I actually, just on that point there as well, I've actually started hiring people part-time, and it's been really useful from Alexa. You know, there's this big great reset. People are choosing to spend more time at home, fine, you know, but it also means it's cost effective to me as a consultant or a business. We can have 3 days per week. They get a lovely weekend, but we get really maximum output from them, and they're refreshed. There's no burnout. I just wanted to read some points as well from your article in the HBR. It's really interesting. Some stats that are there just for the readers and listeners. In 2017, the Project Management Institute, 2017 is a while ago, the PMI estimated that the value of project-oriented economic activity worldwide would grow from 12 trillion in 2017 to 20 trillion in 2027. That is huge. That is massive amount of money. And you also had a bit around the GDP, particularly for Germany, which was great. In 2019, they accounted for as much as 41% of the total GDP. And I think you're bang on the mark there, at least from my observations, and you know far more than I do, but there is this kind of swell of projects. You know, you can see it when they replace the M for a B. Down here in Australia, most projects are now multi-billion-dollar projects with very, very long durations. And obviously that adds an element of risk, but it means that there's opportunity for everyone in there. And more people are coming towards working with projects or types of projects now, from infrastructure, defense, and then, you know, you sprinkle a little bit of digital fairy dust in there as well, which is always great. Antonio, one more question from me, and I know Dale's eagerly awaiting, is the future, which we'll park for now, but in the current position, you're working in Belgium, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
What's interesting to me is just the culmination of international knowledge of projects and access to the information. So what are projects like in the UK? What are projects like in Europe? What are projects like in Australia? Are you working on any research to gather that information? I find accurate information about the success or the non-success of projects is really useful. Case studies, lessons learned. Are you doing anything in that space?
No, I'm a big fan of the cultural part, and so I look more at how people carry out projects based on their culture, kind of more national culture. So I'm a big fan of Erin Meyer from INSEAD. She worked about the cultural map and recently launched a book with the CEO of Netflix about the culture of Netflix. So I think there are cultures which are much more prone for project management, not just the culture, but also the resources they have. Obviously, China and Asian companies tend to be much more agile and project-based. For example, Alibaba has produced the most number of CEOs from a company spinning, going to another company, because they use this concept of end-to-end project management, right? So I think we are a bit not the best in Europe doing projects. We are not great. I think we tend to focus more on the process rather than on the content and maybe on the benefits. So there is quite, and then we like to argue and challenge things that have been decided. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I don't mind being innovative, but do it at the beginning of the project, not afterwards. So I think there's a challenge with this culture where, yeah, you argue constantly about and make changes constantly. I think this is spot on where you are playing with the controls part. So yes, I think that's a field for research. It's not mine, but I do love the topic.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So are you suggesting that then agreeableness is leads to better project outcomes than not being agreeable?
I do think that you need some sort of alignment and consensus with the key stakeholders if you're working for clients. And that's what I propose in the book is don't look just for the requirements with the stakeholders, but look also for the benefits. Don't make the benefits on your own, right? Or with the finance people, but ask your stakeholders, what will mean for you this project being successful? What do you expect from this project? So there's nothing better to get benefits expectation than from your stakeholders. Then you can manage, and you can manage your expectation much easier than just focusing on requirements on features. So yes, definitely, I think there needs to be some consensus. Otherwise, yeah, you're just going to be challenging all the time, almost everything. That's my view.
It's an amazing view, I think, Antonio. One of the things I think we love about this podcast is we just, it is our views and we put them out there, and whether people agree with them or not, is up to them to make their own minds. But the great thing is your views are backed up by a lot of research, which is fantastic. And you mentioned one or two things that got me thinking. So if we're seeing this shift to a project economy whereby operational staff are moving into projects, are we then suggesting that operational skills are the most transferable into the project world? Because what we do know is we've got a skill shortage. As you just mentioned, we have millions and trillions and billions and whichever gazillions being invested in the next few years. Yet we don't know if we've got enough resources to actually carry out that. And yes, to a certain extent, we can rely on technology to try and fill that gap because it's catching up. And I think last year we had huge investments in AI and technology in the project space. So it's massive. So that, plus including what you just said, leads me to believe that, yes, we're absolutely moving in that direction to the project economy. However, I don't know if we are prepared yet, and have we done the analysis to understand what is the skills gap? Where are we going to get the skills from? And are we just setting ourselves up for massive failure? What is the risk we're taking on with investing in all of these projects?
Well, a great point, Dale, as well. I think it leads to a big topic that I don't want to address in this question, but it leads to the massive, almost shameless success rate of projects, which is around 30%, whatever you look at. Again, very objective, not very kind of, but that's another discussion we can have. It's I feel ashamed in a profession where 7 out of 10 projects fail. But to your point on the resources, I think, yes, I think there is this massive amount of people who have been working a hierarchy in marketing, finance, operations, departments that need to find a new place, because that's where artificial intelligence is coming over. Just a small anecdote from a friend working in BNP Paribas, a bank I work for. He was head of risk management for all these loans, and he had a team of 25. This is about 4 years ago. 25 people working for, I think, was 20 years in the same space. Risk management. So this deep technical expertise, which is what we've been building for 50 years, right? Deep risk management. And one day the boss said, "Hey, Iñaki, today we found a machine that can do your job and all your team cheaper, and they don't need breaks. The machine can do the risk management for you. So you guys, you need to move to work in this type of projects now, and you're going to be part of this big project." And Iñaki calls me, "Hey, Antonio, oh, I have never learned project management. I don't know. I just feel very worried and really, I don't know if I should leave the bank. And I said, listen, take it easy, Iñaki. I'll send you some papers. He's read a bit of my work. He started working in the project. And 2 months after, he said, hey, Antonio, I love this job. I really, I really, it's kind of very different than working in my risk department all the time. I'm meeting new people. I'm talking with the legal department. I'm talking with marketing. I don't know what's going to happen in 9 months because the project is finishing, but so far I love it. So I think there's a lot of people in the situation of my friend Iñaki that they feel afraid. They've been working in projects, but not full time. You guys, me, we've been working in projects. We know there's a Neto project and something will come afterwards. But for many people, 80% of the people, they don't know that, right? They have this career job descriptions, right? Which says in 3 years, you're going to move to that thing. And now what I'm saying is job descriptions are dead. We don't need job descriptions, right? It's something from the past. So now suddenly there's 80% of the people in this company will lose their job descriptions, will work 6 months in a project. We don't know what's next. So that's creating a this big reset, and people are panicking and not knowing until they find, like you were talking before, well, the pleasure of being able to choose. I worked 3 days in that project, and then things change. So there is absolutely there's a skill gap, which I think is not that big, because again, project management is not like the most complex thing, right? It can be learned. It's a lot of common sense, and you have good people to rely on. So it's more that kind of big step and getting used with uncertainty, getting used to have a job that in 9 months might disappear. And that's where I think people are struggling most.
Yeah, it's a really interesting points you raised there. When you mentioned common sense, you know, the old saying that common sense isn't that common. So it made me chuckle when I thought about it. But no, I think you're right that it's the fact that people don't realize their skills are transferable, right? And as soon as you show them, actually what you do is not too dissimilar to what we do in projects. You know, financials aren't that different to looking at project cost engineering, or whatever the case may be. You know, it's not hell of a different. You just need to tweak what you're doing. And also, as you're saying, there's tools to help us with the more technical details these days. It's more about interpreting that data. And data science is one that's popping up as well. I even think the project controller's role is starting to become obsolete, and we'll see more data scientists coming into that space as we evolve as well. But you mentioned a little bit about failure, and we won't go, I guess, into every single stat into why things fail, because we've spoken a lot about it before around, you know, have we set the baselines incorrect upon which we're measuring? Is that why they're failing? Are they too stringent? Have we set off on the wrong path in the beginning? You know, the whole like sort of, it's so immature, the scope's so immature, yet the politician goes out and says we're going to spend X and we deliver by this date. And lo and behold, we overspend and we're late. So are baselines correct? Who knows? But I want to focus more around structures of mega projects. So typically you've got the client, main contractor, subcontractors, etc. And you've got these whole bunch of contracts in between all of them. And then, as you say, you've got the benefits, but the benefits are only really being managed by the client. Now, if we switch that on its head and we actually gave everyone a bit of skin in the game to say, really, we are all accountable for the benefits, and we changed those structures where everyone was more in a partnership than sort of this structure, would that perhaps change things? Because it's quite a traditional way, old school way of thinking. And I'm thinking, as we're moving and evolving, perhaps there's a new way to look at things. Have you done any research or reading around the structures upon which projects are delivered?
I'm not the expert, to be honest. Again, I'd like to talk of the things I know. I can give you my opinion, of course, which I do believe that these things are a bit outdated. Many of the concepts that we use in project management are a bit outdated. I think they're coming from the 80s, from the 90s, from the 70s, and there has not been huge amount of evolution in the project management space. And Agile came with a very different approach and wiped away most of the IT projects. And so I do think that there's a need, and that's what I propose in the book, is we need to reinvent project management. I think it's there's no doubt that projects are there. We all need to work in projects, but we need to refresh and reinvent project management. And one of the areas I strongly believe is the structure, and is how we look at projects from the beginning till the end. I say that we need to look more into the innovation part as well, that we should not just ignore what happens in innovation, but be a player there. And in the structure, what I see is that there is a move towards this type of ecosystems where I think when you look, for example, at the development of the COVID vaccine, all right, if you look at Moderna, BioNTech, Pfizer, these are massive projects, mega projects, but the way they work is with a very light structure, right? Very agile, very flat structure with, of course, controls they're needed, but also focus on allowing for taking risk, allowing for, we have a big plan and we want to deliver that, but actually let's use some agile here and there and allow for failure and revamping very quickly. So I would say this is a very different case than when you're building the London Tube or high-speed trains. Of course, every project's a bit different and the structures, but you do think that structure can be a factor which impacts the success of the project if it's not well done, and if there's no agility, flexibility, and people, I think it's very important that they don't just stick with their roles. No, some of these people I've met, they feel like because I'm in the sponsorship role, I should not do those kind of things. No, this is a team sports, right? And sometimes you want the sponsor being there on the ground. The same for customers and suppliers. Why should not they be part of that? Why cannot they have a say? I think a great example is Alam Mulali when he was developing the Boeing 747 in Boeing. He put in the steering committee the customers. He put in the steering committee the suppliers. He had a weekly steering committee where everybody could join, right? All the 10,000 people working in the project could connect to some part of the steering committee to listen how things were treated. So I think, yes, absolutely, that we need to refresh a lot of our concepts.
Yeah, no, great points. And I mean, we could probably do a whole podcast on project sponsors and what they do and what they don't do and what they should do, and benefits management, all that. But I just want to pick up on your point on failure as well. I'm rereading Matthew Syed's Black Box Thinking, and it's so fascinating. And while reading it, I'm halfway through it again, and I'm thinking to myself, if only projects allowed for budgeted for failure, so not risk, for intentional failure, to say we're discovering this and we're going to intentionally fail, and it's actually going to end up costing us less in the long run, and we're going to deliver sooner because we're going to figure out in a quicker speed what works and what doesn't, rather than trying to make the perfect schedule with a perfect scope, perfect deliverables, and we fail in every account. So that's just my comment, but I know Val wants to jump in, so I'm going to let him get in there.
That's a good comment, Dal. And maybe it's not failure, but I think failure and innovation are very similar. They're very, very similar. And I think what's missing, and back to your point as well, Antonio, is the Renaissance type arrangement. Renaissance is French for rebirth. And back then it was very much focused on the reality, the humanism, what makes things great in the real world. We get lost when we get siloed. We get lost when we stick to job descriptions. And if you think about the economy, I mean, that's the theme of this call, is how do we bring back the element that you're not just one person in an organization or a project, you're many. And, we need to reinvigorate the human spirit and be creative. And what happens when we put a lot of rules in place, we stifle innovation, we stifle creativity, we don't make room for failure. We inhibit people's ability to speak out about ideas that are a little bit left of field, that are a little bit different. And we get the same results. And as you said, we're kind of ashamed with some of the results of and the outcomes of some of these projects. I think what we need is a push for a renaissance, and not rather than a reinvention, is a renaissance period that's talking about projects. If projects are contributing, let's say, for all the big project or all the big countries, 40 to 50% GDP, that's huge, right? Now, we could talk about this all day, but I really think that that artist's appetite for interpretation as well is really great. We've had some great podcast guests, Antonio, talking about how we work together, building up on the informal networks of things, the myceliums, building up an understanding of how humans operate. And we can't always be perfect, right? And I think projects are a perfect example of how we can make public mistakes. We can do a lot to affect particularly government projects. And I think a lot of the spending is coming from governments. I was going to ask you a question with the success criteria around projects. I mean, we talk about the iron triangle a lot, but a lot of the projects we look at now are really focused towards green sustainability, about contribution to the community. What about the factor there? How do we bring in some type of responsible success factor as opposed to just cost, time, and quality? What are your thoughts on that?
It's I love the questions. Guys, you're really good, huh? I don't know where you get these questions, but they're all tough and pointy.
Sorry.
And for me, it's late. I need to think now. Did you make
no,
great question. I need that.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I wanted to say first, on the triple constraint, I write, it's another of my favorite topics. I think it's great, but when you look at I put the Sydney Opera House, terrible in some of the aspects of the triple, big success, guys, you're there.
It's beautiful.
Why are we working in a profession where we need to say that project was a disaster, one of the worst, right? We're not credible because we were bad on budget, bad on scope, but yet it was a marvelous thing. So we could go into that topic again on the triple constraint. I created two more triple constraints, by the way, one on value and one on alignment and people. The team, you need the people to be happy and performing, and you don't get that with the triple constraint. Anyway, to your question, absolutely yes. I think we should be the drivers of change. I think where companies are struggling is when you're creating business cases where focus is mostly still in financial aspects, return on investment. And I think as project managers, and I can tell you because I'm living that today, is that we should be the ones who force or push towards, okay, great, the financials is great, but maybe that's 50% of the total benefits of this project. How about sustainability? How do we factor that in? How about diversity? So I think we have that possibility of shaping the way business cases and projects are launched. Don't expect that from finance. Finance will go always for the highest investment, lowest cost. Who's going to make that change happening? So I think the project management profession should be the one driving and say, guys, and there's something more than just return on investment or payback period. How about sustainability? How about carbon? How about plastic? How about, and I just think it's the opportunity now to bring that. We should not be shy. We should not let finance decide. We should push for saying, okay, it might look like this project might be less beneficial, but from a sustainability point of view is much more, right? And what does the public want? What does, so I think that's absolutely something that I like to see. I'm advocating very strongly to project managers to push and to put their voice in saying, okay, we need to change the things now.
Great points. And we are 100% behind you. And it's great that we're talking about this because, again, if we're talking about responsible project economy, we really want things like, how do we reduce emissions or carbon, or how do we alleviate some of our footprint on the planet? How do we improve some of the byproduct wastes that we produce during our production, like plastics, etc. And, we have great conversations all the time. We would love anyone who's interested out there. I'm just going to put it out there, who actually wants to turn this into action. Project Chatter and Antonio are right behind you. We'd love to be involved. I'm putting you in there. We have to help each other because, we'll be here in another 10 years, Antonio. We'll have you back, of course, and we'll be talking about the same thing. And we've noticed that with some of the COP26 and these government leaders that we have, still talking about the same thing every 4 years and not really moving the needle much. Obviously, some countries are doing better than others. But projects, obviously, if we do have such an impact on GDP, then we do really need to be responsible for the outcomes of those projects. And I would say as well, just on that point, we get to choose the projects that we work for now. And, I was talking to a few project candidates who were interviewing for a job with us, and they were very, very good because they were young, Antonio. And they said, what kind of projects are you working on, Val? And we mentioned, I say, are they green projects? So I only want to work on projects that are important to the community from a renewables perspective or from a contribution perspective. And I thought, wow, I never asked a question like that when I was being interviewed. And it just shows you the shift in culture. And I don't know if you've experienced any types of change in the way people are viewing projects or that awareness. Can you share any experiences there?
It's in the same lines as yours. It's mostly the younger generations who are kind of more blunt and have been raised maybe with different perspective on the world. And I love one of my keynotes, people like that a lot, is what can we learn from teenagers and young professionals? Not us teaching them like it happens all their lives, but what do they do? What does, for example, Boyd and the guy who created the Clean the Ocean project, how come a guy of 18 years old can launch such a project, Clean the Ocean? He didn't want to clean the pool in his city, right? He wanted to clean the ocean because he went to Greece, and he saw more plastic than fishes when he was doing scuba diving. I say, okay, no, I'm just going to clean the ocean. And I said, well, why don't we listen more to these people? And my keynote, I have like 10 people who have created this type of amazing projects that we should be learning. And so, yes, definitely, I agree with what you're saying is let's listen more to the youngers and give them more space to take decisions and influence how we do projects. It's nothing bad. I think in a project, the good thing is that the team wins. It's not me, the project leader, I'm the winner. It's the team who wins. Who cares who takes the bigger shots, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and just keeping to the theme of economics, because I know you and I and Dale could go through all different types of topics, but the economy always thinks about output, right? So the production output of X, Y, Z, and businesses do the same when it comes to projects. They think a project is a means to an end, i.e. the project needs to make us more money. So it's some type of transformation, it's some type of new service or product, and businesses generally think, well, then I should get some type of return. And one of the calcs we know we use is profit per employee. When we generate benefits for projects, I think a lot of the time we are outcome focused, but we're not really driving a value. And that benefit isn't driven down into the economy of the project teams. So they don't really know what the benefit is. They just know we're going to deliver a rail project. We're going to deliver some subdevelopment station superstructure. We're going to build an opera house. But they don't really know the benefits. And I think we need to do better in communications. Have you got any tips or tricks in your long career around how we effectively communicate benefits and outcomes of projects? And does that help, do you think, in getting teams aligned and being more collectively supportive?
Well, another great question. I think you're touching on the key aspects. I know what you mean now that this show could go for a few hours.
Definitely.
Probably might need to schedule a second one, but anyway, yes, absolutely. Yes, I think we've not been trained. The methodologies have touched just slightly on benefit management. I know 20 years ago, we started to talk about benefit management. It has not stick. It has not been developed. Conceptually was great, practically didn't work. And I think people still talk about the system that they were building. They're talking about the bridge that they're putting in place on. And that's why I put so much focus on what I call the project purpose. I started to talk about this maybe 5 years ago already. I was inspired really by Simon Sinek, for example, and simplicity. And why I realized is that we've not been trained. People are not trained to talk about the value of their projects. Simple example, a few weeks ago, I was talking to a lady working in HR, and I asked her, what's your project? And she said, I'm creating a new HR system. We're implementing a new HR system. I say, why are we implementing a new system? She said, because the old one is old and the new one has new functionality. for creating kind of communities within our company. Okay, interesting. Why do we need communities? And then she said, because, well, currently our staff is not happy. There's many people leaving. And we think that with this community, we'll be able to listen to them. They will feel a bit more connected with us. And then I say, why do you want people to be connected? And because we think that with that, they will be more engaged and they will not be leaving. And then you ask them, and why do you want people engaged? And because we'll keep talents and we'll keep just growing and become a better. And then she realized to say, okay, you're talking about an HR system. Your project is not the HR system. You're creating a project to have your employees more happy, right? And then I asked her, so when are you going to how are you going to measure? And she said through the yearly survey. And I said, when does it happen? And she said it happens in March 2022. And how much you want to get? We want 50% increase in employee satisfaction. So you got it. You don't need more. You have a project which is about increasing the customer employee satisfaction by 50% March 2022. That's your task. That's what you need to talk about 90% of the time to all your stakeholders. Forget about the HR system. People, your team, nobody wants to work in a project with these HRs. People want to work in something inspirational, which is the case, but we don't know. So absolutely, long story short, yes, Val, we need to change radically how we talk. Very simple technique. Ask 3-4 times why we do it. Then put a start, put an end, why, and how much. That's it. That's what you need. That's enough.
Yeah.
And if you don't get there, sorry, then close the project straight away. Don't waste any money. If you don't have a higher purpose and you don't have a date, you don't have how to measure, stop it.
You are bang on there, and I completely agree with you. It's funny, right? Because I think there's an element out there that people think, how can we make our employees happy? Point one, you cannot make your employees happy. Happiness is a self-explorative journey.
Exactly.
Okay, so just reminding everyone out there, but we can give them purpose and meaning. We can make their lives satisfactory by giving them some type of meaning and fulfillment. And I think that's a really great point. And it's funny when you talk about HR, because I've been in similar situations, and a new tool or a new toy isn't going to help the culture. And it's funny because they try to do these these social experiments to force informal networks, right? Because arguably, and I talk to Dale offline about this all the time, most projects that I've ever been on didn't finish because everyone worked 9 to 5. They finished because heroic people put in after hours work, met at the pub with the engineer and the sponsor, had chats after hours on the weekends, worked ridiculous hours and pulled it across the line. And that's the real effort. And no one wants to talk about the undercurrent of projects anymore, but that is really what's driving that economy, right? It's not what happens during 9 to 5. And I've never seen a project finish like that. And maybe I've just been on really terrible projects, but I had a lot of fun on those projects too. So there was a grind. There was an element of grind, resilience, and it was tough, but we worked hard. We played hard together. That's what a team sport is. If you look at rugby, and I know Dale will jump in with a rugby analogy soon, it's about getting in the mud and sticking together and holding the line. And that's what a team does together. And it's very inspiring. And I appreciate your time, Antonio. Dale, it is all over to you, my friend.
I was just enjoying listening to both you and Antonio go. So, I'm a bit sad that you handed over to me. No, but it's great. If I could just comment a little bit on it as well, though. I love the why question. I think it was Dr. Alexia Nelawick we had a couple of seasons ago on critical thinking. And she spoke about the 5 whys. And it just reminded me of that. And if you dig deep enough, you actually find the real reason. And to your point, Antonio, it reminded me of, a project I just recently came off of. I used to tell my team, we're not upgrading the signaling system. We're actually improving the lives of Londoners. And got them thinking differently, right? Of
Absolutely.
What is the actual benefit at the end of the day. And I love the fact that if we can connect it to that outcome, tangible benefit for folks out there that actually means something, not that you're just delivering this widget or that you're going to produce this at the end of the day, but what does that actually mean? I think that makes it much more real. And for the generations coming through, it gives that sense of purpose, which is great. Talking of purpose, though, a quick Google search while we were on the recording the podcast, brings me to your Harvard Business Review Project Management Handbook. And in there it tells me that you're creator of concepts such as the hierarchy of purpose. Can you elaborate what that hierarchy of purpose actually is?
Sure. Well, I've been in PMOs and portfolio management for 15 years, and I tried, like a good student, try to apply all these concepts that we have around portfolio management from both sides of the ocean, all these methodologies. And I realized when I had to prioritize 800 projects that all these things are crap. In practice, you cannot go for putting weights on 800 projects. You cannot get 800 business cases. It would take you like 5 years, right, to do that. So all these nice concepts on paper didn't work in reality. So I said, screw that, let's find something that works, right? And so with the hierarchy of purpose, I'm trying to find a way to prioritize projects in a much more simple way. And from my role, and I prioritize projects in a bank, I prioritize in a pharma company. What I realize is that you need to focus on that 20%. Don't try to go for everything. Don't prioritize your portfolio. Second, look at priorities first. So what are the strategic priorities? If you don't have that in place, forget about prioritizing anything, right? So is priorities, the purpose, it should be a key enabler for prioritization, right? If a project is not on your purpose and in your priorities, kill it, don't start it, right? Don't even try to calculate the business case. You're going to waste 3 months for nothing, just like that, plain. And then the other piece are projects, people, and performance. So 5 Ps. And of course, it's more philosophical than a tool. Just challenging a bit, like we've been talking for a while. We need to, like you're saying, a renaissance of our methods, and portfolio management had to be reinvented. And I'm not saying I have the solution. I just think we need to look at it differently. At least I've done it in practice with senior executives in banks, in pharmas, and it works because they love to focus on the most critical parts. And if you add to that the purpose, then you get maybe 80% right, which is more than enough. So that's a bit the backstory and why I developed this hierarchy of purpose. So to let people, PMOs, portfolio managers, to look at their job a bit different. Again, it's not a recipe, it's not a methodology, but it's more a mindset, which I realized that is what people are looking for when they look at PMO, is the mindset, is that strategic connection and alignment that we bring to the project world.
No, that's interesting. And I think you're right. The more views we bring to the way we deliver projects, the better. We just get that breadth, that sort of wide angle vision, so to speak, which is great. Look, I do want to touch a little bit on your book, the Project Management Handbook, as well. We don't want to give away everything, but just, I guess, Val and I have spoken. We on now, episode 103. We've spoken plenty about a tool belt or a toolkit or a playbook that project managers and project professionals need, because, there's no one single way to deliver a project correctly. You need an array of different strategies, techniques, tools, whatever. And can you please tell me, is your handbook that? Is it? Is it the ultimate guide to every project management's dreams?
Oh, well, I would love to say that. I don't like to say that. Like you said, I think we build this profession with many point of view. I think it's all around crowd ideas, crowdsourcing, and I bring these other triple constraints. I let other people work on that. I developed the project canvas just because I was inspired by Alex and Osterwalde, who I knew, and he has a business model canvas. I say, why do we have nothing in project management? So simple, right? So I'm just kind of replicating things that I see around me that work. And in project management, we didn't have a project canvas. We had tons. I talk about the PM book having 750 pages, version 6. Who's going to read 750 pages? Nobody. And yet, so we're talking about project managers. Imagine 95% of the people like sponsors and so on will never in their life. So my goal with this book was hyper simplification of project management. My target, to be honest, is not the expert project manager. I wanted to target senior leaders, sponsors. For me, if 30% at least of the failure is bad sponsorship, and the other 30% is the organization, the culture, the prioritization, the project selection. So basically, they have about 60% of the responsibility of project success. So that's my target. And then I said, okay, there's plenty of books for expert project managers, but there's 80% of the population who's doing projects. They just want something very simple, right? That you can read, you can apply in 20 minutes. I can teach you in 20 minutes, and you can analyze any project you want, and you can assess whether it's in good conditions or not in 20, 30 minutes, right? So that's what I wanted. So it's for the non-professional. To my surprise, I have received amazing reviews from experts in project management. So because I simplify, I talk the business language, I know. So yeah, I'm very surprised to share, maybe it's to my surprise, because it's not common that Harvard Business Review, which is the most powerful brand in business management and so on, writes about project management. They don't write. The last time was 10 years ago. It was a terrible book, one of the worst. And suddenly they became interested. Was my kind of, remember when I told you I was fired, I said, okay, through HBR, I will be able to teach project management to the senior leaders, was one of my goals. But basically, to the point is that one book like this, just to give you something, a good book will sell 10,000 units per year, first year. We sold like 8,000 in 3 months.
Wow.
And I didn't expect this, but the community of project managers, they've seen project management associated with HBR and say, this is great. This is something that we've been looking. So I'm not saying this is the best book by far. It's not the best book, but it does bring something different. And if people want to use it or use some concepts or this area, I think this is what I like more for the professionals.
No, that is fantastic. I love the fact that you've done that as well. And we do need to spread the word as much as we can, because as we're saying, we are struggling, to get professionals into the profession, and indeed with the right experience and baseline, so to speak. As you say, if people just fall into it, they're sort of stumbling around in the beginning, and it's sort of, learning by experience. But it's great. It's great that that is out there, and it's great that it is such a success. And hopefully you sell many more copies after this podcast as well.
Yeah, hopefully.
Exactly. But anyway, the podcast wasn't about selling copies of the book.
No.
It was about exploring the ideas. And I know Val wants to jump back in, and I'm going to give him another bite of the cherry. Val, over to you.
It's more of a statement really than anything else. I think what we've talked about today was really interesting. We talked about philosophy, we talked about economy, we've talked about projects in general. And one of the things you mentioned was Simon Sinek. And, we were probably big fans of the whole Start With Why. And there's a great book that he wrote as well about Leaders Eat Last. And then he goes on stage and he talks about, I think he interviewed the SEAL team, SEAL Team 6 or whatever it is in the US. And they talk about this 2x2 type relationship between high performance and high trust. And it reminded me, or triggered me really interestingly, that someone, we have all these metrics for someone who is high performing, and we talk about high performing teams all the time. But the challenge with it is actually, if you have someone who's high performing but low trust, that's a toxic leader, and they can affect the project drastically. And I thought that was interesting, because we have all these metrics for performance, and yet we don't ever talk about trustworthiness and how trust factors into team play. If you think about teams and people you work with, you work better with the people you trust, right, than the people you don't trust.
Absolutely.
And we all experienced toxic leaders, very good performers, get the job done, but you would never trust them with your wife or your dog or your children, for that matter. So it's just a really interesting observation. I wonder if you had anything or any thoughts on trust in projects.
I think it's a team sport. So if you don't trust your partners, it's starting to become toxic, like you say. So I think as a project leader, I think it's important, the scoping, the planning. But for me, my role is to create a team. That's maybe the first, just to simplify, my first task as a project leader is get the sponsor to do the job of the sponsor. So that's the number one thing that I do. Hey, sponsor, what's your role? And if not, I'm going to teach you. By the way, I want access to you every 2 weeks, half an hour. So I make it very clear. And if you're not buying the game, let's stop the project. Second, make a team. I think that's, and one thing that I have quite a lot of discussions with senior leaders now. And I say, okay, you know, who are the people more engaged in a project? And they say, well, no, I don't know. Well, the one we appoint. I say, no, volunteers. Have you ever asked for a volunteer in any of your strategic projects in your company? You have 800. No, we never ask for volunteers. We always appoint them. Why companies don't ask for volunteers, right? Well, people who are volunteering, they're already committed because they've seen the content, the purpose, the leader who they want to work for. Of course, then you need to balance the team, but you want some volunteers who's going to be your ambassadors, right? Why companies never ask for volunteers? I never understood. So that's what I say. Sometimes it's very much common sense that we don't use, but and with those volunteers, you start building the trust. So I would say number 2 aspect for a project manager is build a team, build a high-performing team where trust is a key player, but also psychological safety, where people can take and make mistakes and there's no problem, right? We're going to help you. And everybody plays a role. Everybody's recognized for their contribution. So if you have a sponsor, if you have a team who's ready to put everything that you were saying, work in the evenings if needed, but you know that they're going to be there, I don't think which project can go wrong, right?
Exactly. I think if you start with good foundations, you can build anything. And I think we you know, project management has good bones. Projects generally have some type of structure. What I also think is that a lot of people get confused on the types of projects. I see complex and complicated interchanged a lot, and they are different. They're definitionally different. And so a lot of people talk about complex projects, but what they mean is complicated, but it's not true. And I think what people need to do is take a bit of a sense check as well, and make, we've had Dave Snowden on talking about the Kinefin framework. What type of project are you working on? Is it a simple project? Is it chaotic? Is it complicated? Understanding that first, and then understanding how you would respond rather than react, is a very good way to start a really trustworthy team. And I love your comments there. Thank you, Antonio. That's all from me, though.
No, it's great. I love the fact, Antonio, that throughout the whole podcast, you've kind of spoken about how to just keep it simple. And I think Val and I actually hit that realization point where we were trying to make things too complicated for ourselves. And we just started saying, we're just trying to outsmart ourselves. Stop it and just peel back the layers a little bit. And what actually do we need to do? How do we get the same point across simply, or try and achieve the same thing with as minimal steps as possible? But I love it. Hey, look, we could speak to you, as we said, all night about all sorts of things. We definitely would love to have you back, Antonio. Before we let you go, we've got a quick pop quiz called Fiverr. 5 quick fire questions, very quick, all about yourself. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Fantastic. I think you already answered this one, but here we go. Question 1, early mornings or late nights?
During the week, early mornings. During the weekend, late nights.
The true Spanish. There we go. Question 2, what are the 3 must-have behaviors you look for in successful project teams?
I think it's all about team spirit, generosity, and courage.
Wow, I love generosity in that. Question 3, what is the best book you've been gifted?
Gifted. I love the goal from Goldratt. The goal has really inspired me. I don't know if people know, the goal is about I don't, just check it. The goal, it was something I recommend to all my students.
Fantastic. We'll be sure to check that one out. Question 4, what advice would you give your 10-year-old self?
Oh, wow. Just believe in yourself. I think whatever you think, probably you're right. Don't try to please everybody. Try to please yourself with your thinking, with your actions, with your decisions. Get advice for sure, but don't doubt too much on yourself. I was so doubting on myself all the time.
Yeah, no, great advice. I was too. And I think a lot of people out there do doubt, have a lot of self-doubt. Question 5. If you could choose one person to be stuck in a lift with, who would it be and why?
Well, I guess my wife.
The reason I laugh is not because it's funny, because 2 podcasts in a row, our guests have both said their wives, and that's amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. We had Ian Kamsen on the last one. And yeah, without skipping a beat, he said my wife,
Yeah.
which is great.
It's
She was
a
listening. That's
honor.
why.
Was she listening? She was in the background.
Not here.
There we go. Well, look, Antonio, it's been amazing to spend,
Really.
the best part of the hour with you. And like we say, we'd love to have you back. Before we do let you go, any final thoughts you want to leave our guests listeners with?
No, well, I want to thank you, Dal and Val. I don't know if people realize how much work you put on these things, and you do it on a kind of non-profit. You're not selling anything, so even more commendable. So I do want to thank. I really appreciate people like you guys just trying to get to people like me and other people to just share and let people become better. So just thank you guys. I usually am a bit picky with podcasts, but I didn't have a doubt coming here and join. This is just a very enjoyable discussion, but really people should know how much effort you put on this. So thank you too for what you're doing for the profession.
Wow, thank you. It's our absolute pleasure, and it's been an absolute privilege to have you on the show as well, Antonio. Val, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, look, gracias por tu tiempo.
Muy bien.
I really appreciate the time. Muy interesante, man. I really,
Wow.
I've got a lot of time for my Spanish friends. My wife's Chilean, so I've got a little bit of Spanish in my back.
Okay.
But I think the subject range of project economy, the fact that you're going out with a book in the HBR and it's simple for people and folks to listen to and understand, and your time today, I really appreciated all your angles. I think we'll definitely have you back, my friend. And thanks for your kind words. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anytime. Hasta la vista.
Thank you very much, Antonio. And a big shout out to Jonathan Norman, because he's been amazing putting all the guests in touch, and he's put you as well, Antonio, in touch with us. So thanks, Jono. So folks, as you've heard, that is all the time we have. But remember, if you have enjoyed this episode, please do share it on your social media, and you can pay it forward by helping us out. A massive thank you to our guest once again, Antonio Nieto-Rodriguez. Ooh, I think I got that right.
You got it.
And thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From me and Val, it's bye for now.